Awesome. All right. So where we're going to kick off is on page 92. And where we left off was in the middle of a paragraph, because it was the middle of the bottom paragraph, because that's where we sort of transition from step one to step two, laying down the foundation of what our problem is. And just a little bit of like to recap, what we'll do is we'll just reread the paragraph. So it'll be, as we go, it'll be a little bit of like summary of what we've gone through before. And it's kind of hard to be like, okay, find the line in the middle of the paragraph. I know I sometimes it's like find the book. That's tricky. So we'll just start at the very bottom paragraph. And it says, continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. And that's what we're continuing to do, to lay in the foundation of step one. And step one is really talking about the hopelessness of my condition. And it says, talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. So if I'm wondering, hey, am I an alcoholic, or am I an addict, or do I have a compulsive behavior which could require the 12 steps? Well, these are the diagnostic criteria. The condition of body. And if you're new, or just joining us for the first time, the condition of body that we're talking about is the physical allergy. And that physical allergy is that thing that happens once I start to drink, or I ingest that drug, or I act out on that compulsive behavior, and I need more. And the more that I drink and use, the more that I need to drink and use. You know what I mean? I start drinking and I get thirstier. That's the physical allergy. And when it talk about the condition of mind which accompany it, what we're specifically looking at is the mental obsession. And if you're new to Big Book Studies, new to this study, when we talk about the mental obsession, we're talking about when I am sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated, I get a thought. And that thought happens in my mind. And that thought sounds like a good idea. Something a little like, nobody will ever know. I'll just go out for 3 drinks. You know what? My problem was drinking, but I can smoke crack like a lady. Some of you are like, oh, girl, you don't do nothing like a lady. Accurate. Sometimes it's like, I've done so well for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. I can do it this time. So here's how. Man, I'm in so much pain. If you're feeling the way that I was feeling, yeah, you'd have to get loaded too. You know what I'm saying? That is the mental obsession. And if I have any experiences of my life of that physical allergy, what it's like to start and I can't stop, and I have any experiences from my own life of what I have said, I'm not going to do it again. And I've done it again. Then I have the mental obsession. If I have those two things, man, then I am in trouble. And that is what this illness is. So it says, keep his attention. I can't keep mine, so it'll be hard to keep his focus page. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. And the reason we're doing that is maybe y'all were just a lot more open-minded and not argumentative when you got here. But like, what do we like to do? We like to argue, and I want to find how I'm the exception and I'm not like you. And no, that doesn't apply. But there's 2 things I can't argue with. I can't argue with your experience, because your experience is what has happened. I can tell you I don't like it. I can tell you, oh, I'm different, but I can't argue with it. And the other thing that I don't have to like, but I can't argue with, is what is contained within this book, because this book is a collection of the experience of the first 100, is what we say, probably 80 members, and ultimately the experience of those of us who followed these directions to find this solution. So I can't argue with that, even though we'd like to try. So it says, explain that many are doomed. And when we talk about doomed, what we're talking about is hopeless. I like to say doomed is the fancy word for hopeless. If you remember in the Fantastic Four, the villain was Dr. Doom, which is intimidating. It's like Dr. Hopeless. It's Dr. Silkworth that wrote the doctor's opinion, which is hopeless and doom. Again, I need to work on my attention. I can't keep their attention. Anywho. So it says, doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. And there was in the 1930s, and I think it even went a little further in sort of history, but doctors had this sort of, I want to say almost like policy or their sort of ethics where, hey, we're not going to give bad news to patients because it's kind of going to bum them out. And so they didn't want to tell alcoholics that their illness was hopeless because there was nothing they could do for it. It's a terminal diagnosis and it was going to be a long, painful death, and they just didn't want to discourage them. And so when it says doctors are rightly loath, doctors don't want to tell them the whole truth about their condition. But it says, but you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. And that's the thing, is we lay down the hopelessness of this condition because it is only when I come to that place of hopelessness, it is only when I come to that place of the end of myself, am I willing to grab a hold of the hope that's on offer. Man, if I could just like do something else, I can't even think of something else that would work because nothing else that I tried. But like if I could do something else, I'd probably do that. I'm sure you guys were keeners from the beginning, but I was trying to find some easier, softer ways, I'll tell you, and I couldn't. You know what I mean? And it is when I come to the end of myself, it is when I come to the end of my good ideas, my skills, my plans, my designs, that's when I'm willing to accept the hope that's on offer. So hopeless to hope. And that's that theme that we've been seeing and will continue to see throughout these 164 pages. And so it says, you will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, the traits of the alcoholic. Mental obsession, physical allergy. That's what we're talking about. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he is alcoholic, so much the better. And here's where we transition. Even though your protege, that's the newcomer, the potential sponsee, that person that we're working with, may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. Tell him, and this is in italics. Now keep in mind, if it's in italics, it's important because it's emphasized, but it's also important because about 80 drunks agreed to spend extra money on it. Because in the 1930s, when books were printed, you couldn't just hit Control-I or Command-I if you're using a Mac. You had to physically go in and change the font and the typeface, and that cost money. And so, we're on page 93. For those that just joined, very, very top of page 93, and I'm glad you're here. So that means 100, about 80 drunks agreed to spend money on it, which means that's money they didn't really have. And that means that it's important. And so when it says, tell him exactly what happened to you, what we're doing is we are laying the foundation of our solution. And the solution in 12 step is a spiritual awakening. That is our solution. And so tell them exactly what happened to you. Tell them about the spiritual awakening. Another way to look at what we're doing in this paragraph is we're laying down the foundation of step 2. Because step 2 is all about believing that there could be a power greater than myself. I don't need to like it. I don't need to define it. I don't need to comprehend it. I don't need to understand it. And that power could relieve me of that mental obsession that I have to take that first drink. And so we're laying down the foundation of what our solution is, and we're laying down the information of what they need to know in order to make that second step leap, which is not really a leap. All right. And it says, stress the spiritual feature freely. Let's talk about it. You know what I mean? So many of us, I know I came here with some God issues, and I can't overcome them if I don't talk about them. And I can't, if I don't tell you where I'm struggling, you can't help me see that that bar to entry is so low. So it says, if the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic, and that is with emphasis, that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. You don't have to view God through the same lens that I do. If I were to have a religious faith, you didn't have to join my religious faith. If I had a series of doctrines that just enhanced my spiritual practice, you don't have to look at those. It says he can choose any conception he likes, any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. So that freedom in the second step, that freedom just to begin. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a capital P. See, when we see those capitalizations, those are synonyms, words that we could use for God, that are pointing to God. Or if you're like, man, I don't like that word God, it is a word that we can use instead of God. Power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. And what I want to point out is not believe in spiritual principles. It's not talk about them at a meeting. It is live by them. And the approach that I take with spiritual principles is that these spiritual principles are not nebulous concepts. And this might be something different than you've heard. And if you disagree with me, wonderful. You're right and I'm wrong. Although I will say it's fun over here being wrong. So join me every once in a while. You're right, I'm wrong. For me, the lens that I take with the spiritual principles is that the spiritual principles are not nebulous hope, faith, courage, trust, integrity, but they are the tangible actions of the 12 steps. Because I don't know about you, I can't pull hope out of nowhere. And I struggle, you know what I mean? I can't do it, but I can take the tangible actions. And those are actions that I live by. And again, emphasizing that these 12 steps, they're not a set it and forget it deal. They are a way of life. And it is not that I have work over here, family over here, hobbies, people have hobbies over here, and then 12 step over here. 12 step is the way in which I live my life, and I bring this way of life into every action and every part of it. And that is how I practice these principles in all our affairs. But we're talking about a step 2 idea. We just got to believe that there could be a power. And okay, I'm willing to take some actions I don't want to take, that sort of idea. And it says, when dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There's no use arousing any prejudice. Now, if you remember, to have prejudice is to have an old idea about something I've not had any experience with. You know, I've never done a 4th step, but I know it couldn't help me. Or like, imagine having a strong opinion about Columbus, Ohio. I've never been there. I've got no opinion. It sounds lovely. Truly, I'll go to Columbus. And I don't know why I thought of Columbus. That was very random. Anyway, but it says, so that's prejudice. And so there is no use arousing. So to create any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions. Many of us have had religion pushed down our throat or have experienced a lot of pain and maybe, again, those old ideas. So let's keep the language as simple as possible. Hey, got sober in Columbus. See? No use having any prejudice in Columbus. You can get sober there. Spoilers, you can get sober anywhere. God's everywhere. Heck yeah. I am so here for the geography tangents all day, every day, and I will focus. All right. So there's no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. So we're not going to make anyone believe how we believe or see it how they see. We can share our experience freely, but we want to make this as approachable as possible. If you remember, last week we were talking about when we start working with somebody, we want to get as much information about them as we possibly can so we can see how best to approach them, right? How can I present this information in a way that they will best be able to understand? That's what we're trying to do. So it says, your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. Now, it's talking about somebody who's, had a lengthy experience in religion and religious training and religious education, but I'll throw something else out there. What I found in sort of modern 12 step is there's a lot of people who've been in and out of 12 step for a long time, who are like, oh, I've been in and out of 12 step for however many years. How could you possibly add anything to what I already know, right? That sort of idea of I've been around this thing for so long. Then maybe chronic relapsers, but also maybe if we're working with some of those people who've been sober a long time, and I've started to get dry. You know what I mean? Where it's like we put down the steps, we put down the actions, and yeah, it just starts getting a little crunchy on the inside. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I've been doing this thing for however many years. How could you possibly help me? And I'm also saying that as somebody who I experience that less nowadays. But when I started working with, I was younger than I am now, and I know I got a bit of a young face. Oh, how could you possibly help me, kiddo? And it's like, well, this gives us instructions on how I can face and help somebody overcome that prejudice they might have against just a little drunk, a little crackhead who's just trying to do her best. All right. It says, but he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. So faith, if I do not follow faith with action, I'm going to continue to relapse. If I do not follow faith with action, I'm going to continue to be in a whole lot of pain. And it says to be vital, which is to be life-giving. Faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. So for my faith and belief, and I can have faith in God, I can have belief in God, I can have faith and belief in AA, CA, DAA, any 12-step organization. But if I do not follow that faith up with action, I will relapse. And the tangible self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action, what is that? That is the 12 steps taken out of this book and then going and helping others. That's what we're talking about. So when somebody's like, yeah, how could you possibly, as well, my job is to be a demonstration. See, my job isn't just to tell you, you got to do the steps. My job is to live these 12 steps as a way of life where you cannot deny the change that has happened and to get them curious. I was sharing about this over the weekend. I think it was on the weekend. I don't know. But I was sharing about how a friend of mine, I was on the phone with her a couple of years ago, and she's like, Paige, when I first met you, and when she first met me, that was maybe 2-3 years sober. She said, you were the most self-deprecating, negative person that I have ever met. And I'm just going to say the takeaway from that is I win. If self-deprecation and negativity is a contest, I win. But that's not who I am today. And there's a change that has happened, a demonstration. We will be going through the later chapters, and I so hope you'll come with me because there's so many gems and so much joy in them. But it talks about how cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness, to be that demonstration, to be grounded and rooted in this work, in this way of life, and people can see when we've done it and can see when we're doing it. And it says, now this, I will say, is if you are looking for like a mic drop moment, this is it. I don't know if I've ever said this verbatim to a sponsee because it feels like, woo, drop the mic, but here it is. It says, admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. Ooh, sick bird, that's like, ooh. It's like if your sponsor ever pulled out, like, how's that working for you? It's one of those, like, ooh, calling me out. Ooh, it's uncomfy. It's the good uncomfy, right? So, and it says, perhaps your story, and that's what we're sharing, our experience, will help him to see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We talk about precepts, so again, if this is somebody who is comes from a religious background, that ability to practice the beliefs, right? What we have in 12 step, it's not a belief system. It is a course of action, a series of actions that become how I live my life. And it says we represent no particular faith or denomination. We are dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. And one of the things that I've found, like experientially, is that if it's healthy spirituality, it flows. Do you know what I mean? There's not opposition. I've done a lot of spiritual seeking because I get excited about it. And I've sought from a variety of faiths and traditions. And when it's healthy spirituality, you can find some of these same ideas that we have in 12 step everywhere else. Now, keep in mind, I got to stay here. Now, it doesn't mean I don't get to seek and I don't get to have, if I wanted a faith or a religion, but I got to stay rooted and grounded in this. But man, this is, I mean, there's truth in it. You know what I mean? There's deep and profound truth if I can go anywhere. And these same principles are also found wherever there's healthy spirituality. I say we, it's like, Roland Hazard stumbled into Carl Jung and then stumbled into the Oxford group and then stumbled, to our homie Ebby Thatcher, who stumbled to Bill, who had stumbled, you know what I mean? It's stumbling. I was going to say, we stumbled into the solution. I did many stumbling before I got here, but I didn't have to stumble once I got here. You know what I'm saying? Just a little stumbling humor. So now is when we sort of transition into laying down the program of action, or another way to look at it is laying down the information for the person to make their third step. So again, when we were laying down our problem, we were laying down the information of step one, the physical allergy, the mental obsession. When we were talking about step two, we were laying down the foundation of our solution, which is the spiritual awakening. And now we're beginning to lay down the information in regards to step three, or the decision to take the program of action. And our program of action is the 12 steps. So we're laying down, this is what we got to do to get from problem to solution. And if we decide to do that, that's a third step decision. So it says outline the program of action, 12 steps. That's what it is. Explaining how you made a self-appraisal. That sounds like step 4. And when I shared that with somebody, that was a 5th step. How you straighten out your past. Sounds like when I went out and made my amends. And why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. That endeavor to be helpful is 12-step work. So we can 12 steps. So we're laying down sort of the foundation of what these steps are, these actions are. And it says it is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. It really wants us to, hey, welcome, we're on page 94. I'm glad you made it. When people come and they turn their camera on, then I can see who joined. But if you joined and you joined camera off, I still love you and I'm so glad you're here. I don't play favorites. I love you all. But my attention span is not great. And so that's something that's so incredible. Because I don't know about you, I couldn't find that anywhere else. I never, had a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist that was like, you're helping me more than I'm helping you. They were like, you've got a lot of problems, is more the tack that they took. But there's something pure about how we help each other in 12 steps. There's no money, there's no ulterior motive. It is simply, if I help you, I get to stay sober and I might be able to be of help to you. And there's something about those pure motives that just seems to resonate with people like us, I'm always looking for, what's your angle? You don't really care, blah, blah, blah. But man, this is so pure. And it's almost disarming those like walls and masks that I want to put up. And it says, actually, and I also want to point out focus. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. I just want to emphasize that again, vital. If I am going to stay sober, if I am going to have permanent, contented sobriety, I have got to be working with others. That is what we do. And I say that with emphasis, but I also want you to know I'm saying that with encouragement. If you're here and you're like, I don't know if I could, let us help you help them. Let us help you. That's why we're going through the book. What I found experientially, well, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, is when we go through the book, it helps us be more comfortable being armed with facts about ourselves. So that's the purpose of this thing. That's why we're doing it, so that we can help others. And then, and it's vital, like if I want this recovery, I've got to do this. And it says, actually, he may be helping you, more than you are helping him. And it is the coolest thing to watch. Because if you're reading this part of the book with the sponsee before they've started working with others, immediately they're like, oh, no, that BS, that cannot be true. And they just bite you on it. This is really part where no, Paige. But then they start working with others, they start sponsoring, and they're like, I know, I was just working. Oh man, I feel so much, it was the best, And that's what I mean. When I describe things as being ineffable, which is something that needs to be experienced, to be understood, or I describe it as experiential, meaning I got to do it. That's what I mean. Nobody's going to believe that if we just read it. Oh, thank you. Nobody's going to believe it if we just read it. We've got to experience it to see it. That's what we're talking about. So actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain that he is under no obligation. And that's the thing. If you want to do this, I will bust my butt to make it happen for you. And if you don't, I'm good at respecting boundaries. I'm not going to chase you. Some of you guys know that chasing is not easy, especially if you like go up a flight of stairs. I can't get after you. You know what I mean? So I don't do a whole lot of chasing. I will reach out if I haven't heard from you for a little while because I love you and I care about you, but I'm not going to chase you. So this whole thing, you got to decide if you want to do it. Now, I will say if you book an appointment with me, you got to keep the appointment, but you don't have to work with me if you don't want to work with me. You don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. So, and that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. That's really I think it's so important, at least for me, when I work with people, is I try to emphasize you will be working with others. Because I work with, I was saying before the meeting, I work with a lot of alcoholics, work with a lot of drug addicts because I'm in those fellowships. But I work with a lot of women, and oftentimes this is a generalization, not always the rule, but oftentimes, here's my experience working with women, is they're a little bit more like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, I think I'll make it worse. I always point out it is a terminal illness. It's as bad as it can get. You're probably not going to make terminal worse. And I kind of joke when I'm working with guys where we'll just start off in the doctor's opinion. They're like, I would love to spot. I can't, I got 3 sponsees. I'm like, slow down. Let's do some inventory, guy, and that's just my stereotype with it. But truly, that's what we're trying to emphasize from the beginning, that we're going to work with others. We're going to help others and to prepare. And I really believe, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but I really believe my responsibility, this isn't anyone else's. No one else has to do this. This is my belief about me. And listen, my sponsor will tell you I'm frequently wrong. But my belief about me and my responsibility for those that I work with is not just to take them through the 12 steps so that they have their spiritual awakening, but also so that they are comfortable, not perfectly, because we got to be a little uncomfortable, but they feel comfortable enough to work with others so that they can sponsor others. That's what I feel my responsibility is. No one else has to do it. It's just what I do. So it says, suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Now I've got to get out of self. I got to get out of my selfishness, my self-centeredness, thinking of others, working for others, placing their welfare ahead of my own. Now, if we're new, we might have, and we haven't done this work yet, we might read a line like that and be like, oh, who's going to take care of me? To which I will respond, God. But we don't know that yet, So those of us who've done that, we're like, oh yeah, God's got it, girl. But we got to do it to experience it. So suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Make it clear that he is not under any pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. And that, again, is working with people. They're like, no, yes. And I don't know about you guys, but I also learn a lot from when I've sponsored, and I'm going to put in like little bunny ears and little quotes, when I've done it wrong and when I've made mistakes. You know what I mean? How I sponsor today is after a series of not doing it very well. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's how we learn. That's how we grow. And it's we got a thing in the chat. My first sponsor said, I will sponsor you on one condition. You will help somebody else. I don't care how long it takes. You are not that important to be the end of the line. I'm helping you so you can help others. Absolutely. And also, if what I do with my sponsees when they're getting to that place they're willing to work with others or ready to work with others, willing. I'm throwing people at them. I'm helping them make those connections because I know what it's like when we're new at this thing, and it's like, you want me to approach a newcomer and get their number? What am I gonna say? We can start with hello and introduce yourself, but I know that's a little overwhelming, you know. And so I'll start helping them connect with some newcomers that they could possibly start working with. So I throw people under the bus, is what I'm saying. A lot of my sponsees have been under the bus. Alrighty. So it goes on to say, yeah, you needn't that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. And we love to talk about happy, joyous, and free, but we have all these other things that we need to do to get there, which is to show up to this idea of sponsorship with that humility, you know, that idea of sane, quiet, full of human, I'm here to help. And if you want it, I'll do anything I can. And it says, maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. And I can't remember which speaker I stole this from, but I stole this from a speaker, probably more than one, because we all steal from each other in 12 step. But it's that idea, like our job is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable, right? So we gotta make them a little uncomfy. Yeah, Eileen was a slow jaywalker. Yeah, ended up under the bus, absolutely. And it says, so this is all to the good, like to kind of shake them up a little with questioning about whether or not they have this thing. And here's why. The more hopeless he feels, the better. See that transition from hopeless to hope. Why is hopeless good? He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. Man, if I got food in my belly, a job, you know, a relationship, I've got a car, I don't got that many problems. You know what I mean? I don't need to do that inventory. Ugh, amends? No, thank you. But when I've come to the end of myself and I come to the end of my skills, hey, welcome. See if you join him, camera on, I'll notice. I have really bad attention span. Focus page. That'll be the thrust of today's episode is Paige can't focus. Focus. But yeah, it's good. But so what we're talking about is like, if I come to the end of myself, that's when I'm willing. That's when I'm willing to grab a hold of this. You know, I got no other way. I'm backed into a corner. I'm just grabbing a hold of whatever I can. I got nothing else. I'll grab a hold of this. So it's only when like I've run out of options that inventory becomes appealing. Unless I do inventory regularly, and then you know how great it is. It's so helpful. Anywho, your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. I don't think anyone was jazzercise to do a fifth step. Nobody was like, oh, boy, I can't wait for that one. You know what I mean? No, we're resistant to it, you know? And it says, do not contradict such views. So we're not going to have an argument. We're not going to try to convince them. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to share our experience. Tell him you once felt as he does, because who hasn't, right? But you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. So we share our experience. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, keep in mind, in 2024, we probably met them at a meeting, so they probably know. I don't need to spring that information on them. They probably are aware. If he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. And what I will say about that suggestion is, yeah, let me see if I can, oh man, We do a magic trick. I got Ben's book. Magic. Listen, I am not assertive enough. And I am not, again, if you take my book up a flight of stairs, I'm gonna have a hard time chasing you down to get it back. So I'm not gonna lend you my copy of the book. So again, I don't take that one verbatim, but I will get you a copy. I will make sure you get one. Yeah. But I do know some people who are like, absolutely, I lend out my copy of the book. And they're assertive human beings, and I wonder what freedom they must have in their life. But they're like, that's because I will be getting that book back, and they're convinced. You know what I mean? And they will, and they do. And I'm like, I'll just help them get one. And then they can ghost me if they want. All right. And so page 95. It says, unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Now, I want to point something out. We laid down the foundation of step 1, step 2, and step 3 in one meeting. Another way to look at it is we laid down the information about what our problem is, what our solution is, and how we get there, that program of action in one meeting, in one sitting, in one afternoon. And that's where it's saying, give them a chance to think it over. Let's give them some space to make a decision. And it says, sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. Now, what I just want to emphasize is I've been in meetings where people would use that sentence taken out of context as a way to be like, no, we take our time. And that's not what that's saying. What it's saying is like, hey, maybe don't start on the 4th step on day 1. Maybe wait until day 2. That's what it, like, truly, that's what it's saying. So we do, welcome, page 95. We do work through these steps and can work through these steps very quickly and thoroughly. Both those things can happen. And at least for me, I have found when I'm working with others, it's imperative that they happen quickly and thoroughly. And it says, you will be most successful with an alcoholic if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Now, it is helpful not to put on capes, and be the superhero, super page to the rescue. Here I am to save the day, because we don't like being saved. You know what I mean? It's just not effective. It just doesn't work. But again, I want to put that line into a bit of historical context. When it talks about, not having any passion for crusade or reform, in the late 1930s, when this was published, the discussion in and around the prohibition of alcohol was still a heated debate. The 18th Amendment had been repealed, which made the sale of alcohol legal again in the United States. And we know when governments change laws that's the end of the story, and everyone's okay and has nothing bad to say or fight about. So it was like a hot, it was a hot button topic. And it's saying like, hey, knowing that this is a bit of the political climate, trying to act like we're an alcohol reformer could cause a lot of problems and could prejudice people who we might otherwise help. So it says never, and I think this is just as applicable today, never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. We're showing up shoulder to shoulder upon this common journey. I'm not better than you because I did some work. You're not less than me because you're struggling. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. The simple kit of spiritual tools is these 12 steps. Oh, Rob's got a little toolbox behind him. It fits. The simple kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. So the simple kit of spiritual tools, these 12 steps. But again, could you imagine if I showed up to an auto repair place and I was like, look to this new apprentice who gets a job at my auto mechanic repair shop. You can tell I'm really good at tools because I know all the words for the things. But let's say I got a garage to fix cars, and we get an apprentice that comes in brand new. And I'm like, here are your tools. And the guy looks at him and is like, okay, what do I do with them? And it's like, figure it out, right? It does no good if I am not experienced and adept at using the tools myself. And this is just a reminder that as we do our evening review, as we continue with inventory, as we continue with prayer and meditation and our own work in and around amends, that is not just so that we get to stay sober, that is not just so that we get to live in the sunlight of the Spirit and grow spiritually, but it is also, it gives me more experience that I get to use to help another alcoholic or another addict. The more that I do this work, the more that I have to offer others. And it was the coolest thing. I was out of town. I was speaking at a roundup, and I had a grand sponsee call me that was like, he was struggling with some stuff. And I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. Let me just tell you what the fourth column of my inventory looks like. And he's like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Right? The more I take and have a look at me, the more that I'm able to help others, the more adept and skilled that I am with these tools. So simply lay out the simple kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. And you know, one of the most, sometimes I do things in ways that are a little unconventional, especially in sponsorship. And if I'm going, working with the sponsee and they're kind of struggling with some stuff, it doesn't matter what step we're on. I'll always pivot and go to inventory. Because the truth is, if they're not willing to write inventory, they weren't going to be willing to write inventory. But if somebody's new and hurting and struggling, and I show them how to take something through the columns, and they start to get a little freedom from it, they see how that tool works. And also it dissipates a lot of that fear that we have of, the big unknown of this absolutely not scary fourth step. So sometimes I'll do stuff like that, a little unconventional. So offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. And that's my experience. If you give me like an inch, I will go a mile. I'm super codependent. I've written inventory on it. I will do anything and everything that I can to help you have this experience. If you want to do this work, I got you. If you don't, that's cool. Again, not going to pressure you, but this is all that I got. You know what I mean? And if you want it, man, I will bust my butt to do everything I can to make it happen for you. And it's what it says, if he's not interested in your solution. So if I got a newcomer or a prospect or a possible sponsee and they don't want to work the steps, they don't want to have a spiritual awakening, this is the direction. If he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties, yeah, I wouldn't lend him money. Just as a general thing, maybe don't give him money. A lot of what we're going to read about how we support them was in a time when there weren't a lot of social safety nets, and just I don't know if that's a good idea to give them some money or a nurse for his sprees. And that could be an emotional nurse for their emotional sprees. I'm willing to help, and if you bring me a problem, I will listen and we will take it through inventory. But if you just want to hold me on the phone hostage for 2 hours and tell me about how oh, that person sucks and what a monster they are, I don't have time. I'm busy. And so you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. Great pain is our great teacher. Great pain is what breeds that hopelessness. And man, sometimes I just need to, this is an Al-Anon principle, but sometimes I just need to let people have the dignity of their own experience, to do it their way. Now, I always got to be honest with them, because it can be easy to be like, oh, they don't want it enough. Sometimes people do not know that they suffer from this illness, and they do not know what it, if I go to a room and somebody tells me, just don't drink, go to meetings, just get a home group and hang out. You know what I mean? If I hear I can stay sober on the coffee, I'm gonna do that, because that's way easier looking than some inventory and amends. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes they don't know, but if I can tell them the truth, I can let go and I can leave them in God's hands and let them have their own experience. And when I've come up to people that did not want to do things or wanted to do a different methodology or try a different way, I say, go have at it. One of two things will happen. One is that your idea will work and then you don't need my help. Great. and the other is that it won't work. And if it doesn't work, then that's crossed off a thing on our list. And it has helped us grow that place of hopelessness where I might be willing to try this way. So it says, if he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. So to truly make that third step decision, deciding to do this work as a way of life, he should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. This is important. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. And you know, one of the things is when I work with, I'll just kind of share how I work with sponsees. When I get somebody new, this is the way that and this is just what I do. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not saying it's the best way. This is how, in an ideal, perfect world, Paige likes to take people through. It says, read this book. And I know a lot of people struggle with reading this book. And so to send them off to read this book, they might not glean the meat. I know I didn't I wasn't a dummy, but we agnostics, I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about. You know, I just didn't get it. So what I like to do with my sponsees is I like to sit down with them. And you don't have to sponsor in this way. And you don't have to be sponsored in this way. I'm just sharing my experience. I like to sit down with them for so if they'll sit for two or more hours, I'll sit with them 2 or more hours a day and go through the book line by line. And when it gives us the direction, we take the direction. And the reason I like to do that is I can get through the book quickly and thoroughly. But also in going through the book line by line, they feel more comfortable and able to sponsor. And so when it gives us these directions and like, okay, share from your own experience what the mental obsession was like, they're more able to sponsor in a more flexible way. I can't always do that. When I do that, we go quickly. I can get through a full set of steps in a month, maybe 60 days if they got a lot in their inventory or a lot of amends. We go quickly, but there are times when I'm working with somebody and it is very clear that they are not going to make it the week sober. So we follow these directions and we go through quickly and we get into inventory. We get through that 5th step. We take that quiet hour 6 and 7 and we go out and we go make amends and we go hard and we start working with others. And when we get to there, that's when I'll go back and I like to read with them line by line so they still get that experience. That's what I do. That's not what you have to do, but it's one of the things that I like to sort of challenge some of these preconceived notions of how working with a sponsee ought to look. At least where I live in the world, you'll see, okay, I meet my sponsor once a week for 1 hour, and but I have my sponsee call me every day. I'm like, listen, if they're going to call, why don't you guys just use that time to do the step work? You might hear me say, man, I don't got 2 hours to meet them every day. Cool. Do you got half an hour? Could you meet them half an hour every day to go through the work? That sounds doable. You know what I mean? We're doing this on Zoom. Zoom works. You know what I mean? Doesn't have to be in person. And what I've found is that builds momentum. I'm a big believer in momentum. And whatever I do builds momentum, and whatever I don't do builds momentum. If I were to take somebody through line by line, and I was to take them through meeting them once a week, every week, well, we're like 35 weeks into this. Man, most people could not survive 35 weeks of going through. You know what I mean? I'd have to go a little bit quicker. At least I found. And so I like to, and I keep in mind, I know I go a little slow because I get all excited and I go on tangents and stuff. And I'm like, listen, let me tell you the golf course that Bill was golfing on. You know, I give that information, which is not needed for sobriety, but it's fun. But so and again, it's from doing it wrong and making mistakes and finding that, man, when people call me to check in, I get taken hostage for those 2 hours. They just talk to me and I'm like, oh, we gotta reframe this. We gotta do something that's more effective, because I still call with the same problems the next day. It didn't really help, you know? And so that's how I approach it. And I love that idea of looking at it as unconventional and seeing and challenging some of the things that we hear in the rooms and seeing how we can do it in a way that might work for our schedule, might work for their schedule, and might be more effective. So it says, bottom of 95, if he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, Encourage him to follow his own conscience. Again, either it'll work or it'll cross something off the list of things that do not work, and it will lead him to that place of hopelessness. We have no monopoly on God, but I love this. We merely have an approach that worked with us. And that's the thing, is like, it says merely, but it's something that worked. I couldn't find anything else that worked. But point out that we alcoholics have much in common, and that you would like in any case to be friendly. Let it go with that. And it says top of 96. And top of 96, it makes the joke about, oh, the confused sponsee who went to page 96 instead of 69 for the sex inventory. Don't be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Ooh. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You're sure to find somebody desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. Confused sponsee. That's not how we do relationships. But it does say, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. So if somebody's not showing interest, if somebody's like, nah, I don't know if I want to do it, or they start rescheduling. When I have people that start rescheduling, I've learned to just be very honest with them and let them know, people that don't keep appointments, people that reschedule, they don't stay sober. I've not had anyone that made a habit of rescheduling or not keeping appointments stay sober. And just a practical piece of information is what I prioritize does not get rescheduled. We don't reschedule priorities. And so we cannot say recovery is a priority if I'm rescheduling it. But it's important for me, I give them that information and I let them make their own decision. So it says, if they're not interested, that's okay. Search out another alcoholic and try again. So that's what we got to keep doing, finding people to work with. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. And man, who among us hasn't chased somebody who cannot or will not work with us? I think we got to go through that, learn that lesson through experience. But if somebody doesn't want to do it, that's okay. We go find somebody who does. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced he cannot recover by himself. So to give them the dignity of their experience, to try to do it on their own, to try. They're not going to be convinced by me negging. I have never negged anyone successfully, and I've never been negged successfully. You know what I mean? In a permanent way. It's just not going to work. But if I let them experience the pain of their untreated illness, of their relapses, of their experience, that's going to breed the hopelessness. And it says to spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy, right? Permanent, contented sobriety, live and be happy. One of our fellowship, Bill, failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. That's 6. There's probably more than that. Hold on. My second, where did it go? My second thing in the chat, my second favorite line in the book: to spend too much time on any one alcoholic is to deny another alcoholic an opportunity and an emphasis to live and be happy. And that's what we get to offer. We get to offer life. I don't have the power to fix them, save them, cure them, any of that, but we get to offer this way of life. And it's the most incredible thing to see that light come on within them. That light that is life, that is the power of God within them, to watch that happen. So it says, suppose now, I'll finish that. One of our fellowship, Bill, failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. And again, recovered. That does not mean cured, but that means the obsession has been removed. It says, suppose now you're making your second visit to a man. So this is trip number 2. All of that was trip number 1. It doesn't take long. We can go quickly. Trip number 2, give him a chance to think it over, right? He has read this volume. Often I'll read it with him. And it says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery, right? So he's ready to do the deal, do the steps, made a third step decision. Having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. So we're showing again what we have done. Let him know you're available if he wishes to make a decision. Step 3, and tell his story. Step 5. And so when we were talking about step 5, and we were talking about all those people that we could take our 5th step to, we popped over to page 96, and it's like, well, if we have somebody that's taken us through the work, we can consider them first. But if we were to be alone in the world and we don't have anyone else, then we could look at clergymen, family, don't do that, but those other options that they give in step 5. And it says, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult somebody else. So if somebody's wanting to take their 5th step to somebody else, that's okay. That's absolutely okay. We're just here to help guide them through these actions. And so that's a really good place to leave off, because we're going to transition into, thank you for popping in. We're going to transition in, right? The focus is not great. We're going to transition into how we give and what that looks like. And so it's a beautiful place to leave off. So I'll stop the recording and we can unmute and say a prayer. So thank you.